that's going to dent a lot of things. So I'm fairly certain that a majority of us can look back on our past and look at our past appearances and realize that we might have had some things that at the time we thought were kind of cool and then realize it didn't look the greatest. In my case, it was I used to rock a dirt stash. In my dad's case, he used to have a mullet. In Braviary's case, it used to look like it had ice cream for hair. But that's okay. As time went on, I realized to get rid of the dirt stash, and Braviary became the Murica bird that we all know and love today. In this case, though, we're talking about Hisuian Braviary. We're bringing up Braviary's past, and we are talking about its psychic flying days before it became a normal flying type bird. So, in the case of Hisuian Braviary, we have an immunity to ground. We have a 4 times resistance to fighting. We have a regular resistance to psychic and grass. And then we have a fair amount of weaknesses to ice, electric, rock, ghost, and dark. But that's all right. Hisuian Braviary has some interesting stats that more than make up for it, as well as its abilities. So for starters, with our stats, we have 110 HP. We have the 83 attack that will later on go on to be the more physical prominent attack stat of the original bird, but in this case, it's at 83. It's a lot weaker than its Unovan counterpart. And then we have 70 defense, 112 special attack, 70 special defense, and 65 speed. Now, 65 speed is an interesting speed tier to have. It's slow enough that it can work in Trick Room, or if you really want to invest in some speed EVs, you could make it work outside of Trick Room. As far as our abilities go, we have Sheer Force, so basically any attack that has a secondary effect has that effect nullified, but it gains a 30% boost in power. On top of that, if you run a Life Orb on Hisuian Braviary and use one of these moves, it also nullifies Life Orb's recoil effect of taking 1/10 of your HP, which is rather nice. We have Keen Eye as our other main ability here, which basically means its accuracy can't be lowered. It also ignores the evasion boosts of the opponents, which is rather nice to have. And then finally, our hidden ability is Tinted Lens. So basically here, anything that would be normally resisted has its power doubled. So basically, you're losing the resistance on the target and doing more damage that way. So that's not a bad ability to have. So let's jump right on into it. I was thinking with a Sheer Force Life Orb set, we could go for a couple of different things. We have Psychic that takes advantage of our Psychic type stab. It also benefits from Sheer Force. We can go for Protect to keep ourselves alive. We have Shadow Ball for generic coverage. And then finally, we have Hurricane if we just want to absolutely nuke things. This thing also gets Air Slash, and originally when I was looking at building Hisuian Braviary, I didn't realize that it got Hurricane right away, so I was looking at Air Slash. But Hurricane just has that nice increase in power. Now, it's 70 accuracy. That's very risky. But if you want to play this thing on a rain team, Hurricane becomes unmissable in the rain. And the best part is that part of the ability doesn't get negated by Sheer Force. So basically here we have a 110 stab flying type attack that can't miss in the rain. It loses its 30% chance to cause confusion, which is okay. You don't need confusion if they're dead. So there you go. We could go Terra Flying with Braviary if we really wanted to double our stab on Hurricane, or we could go for a completely defensive Terra. If we wanted to, we could go Terra Fairy. This thing does get Dazzling Gleam, but Dazzling Gleam wouldn't benefit from Sheer Force or the Life Orb boost. So in that case, you would be probably looking to strictly just get around the Dark and Ghost weaknesses by becoming resistant to Dark and just neutral to Ghost. You would also become neutral to rock, electric, and ice as well, and you would only become weak to steel and poison if you did go Terra Fairy. So I think there's a strong case to make for Terra Fairy if you wanted to. Because it's a special attacking bird, you don't have to worry about Terra Fire and Burns. You could go for maybe Terra Water if you wanted to just become weak to grass and electric, and then that way you would then become neutral to rock. You would become resistant to ice, so you could get around that so long as you're not taking a freeze dry. You could make the case for maybe Terra Fighting. I'm pretty sure Braviary does get Focus Blast. We'll double check. I could be wrong here. Yeah, we are wrong on that one. But you could go Terra Fighting. You could go Terra Blast with it if you wanted to get some surprise fighting type coverage to deal with an ice type or a rock type here and there. You could go Terra Ghost if you wanted to become immune to Fake Out, because you are Fake Out bait if you're still flying, because Psychic Terrain won't protect you and you wouldn't gain the benefits of Psychic Terrain to boost up your Psychic. So you could go Terra Ghost. If you wanted to, you could run the Covert Cloak to protect yourself from Fake Out. Because here's the thing about Braviary. You're slow with 65, so Trick Room would be a good idea to run with this thing. You could run it without Trick Room, because this thing can hit up to 107 speed if you really wanted to make it run up to 107. So what I was thinking here was, you could do one of two things. You could do a slow, bulky bird, or you can do a faster, moderately hard-hitting bird as well. So looking at the speed right here with 0 IVs and 0 EVs, on a non-benefiting nature, you hit 63. Hindering nature was the word I wanted right there. You hit 63 points. That's pretty good for being in Trick Room right there. Now, what I was thinking is, if you wanted to and go max special attack investment, you hit 180 on a quiet nature. As far as max HP investment goes, you hit 217. That's relatively nice. 90 in each defense isn't terrible. You could lower your points just a little bit, like maybe say if we bring this down to 215 and maybe go to 278, we could go up to 93 and 92 with 20 into defense and 16 into special defense. But when you have more than 3 stats that you're investing in, the numbers don't quite even out. So maybe what you could do is you can just go into one defense or the other to get a little bit of extra bulk depending on what you're worried about taking hits from. Now you could, as I mentioned, go for some speed as well. So if we switch the IVs to being back into full for our speed, we switch this to a modest or timid nature, which we'll go timid on this one. You can hit 107 speed with only 100 EVs into the speed stat right there. And then from there you could go into your bulk. You'd still hit 207, which is relatively nice. If you wanted to, you could go maybe 206 and then go 4 and 4 to hit 91 if you really wanted to. And then that way you could play around with your numbers. If you want to have a Tailwind setter right there, now you're going to outspeed Dragapult. If you wanted to go up to 112 so that you outspeed the likes of Electrode and eventually Calyrex Shadow, you can do that. You won't be outspeeding Regieleki with this thing, but at least you can outspeed Calyrex Shadow Rider and Electrode by going up to the 112. All you would need is 132. You could put that 140 in there to hit 203. If you wanted to round the numbers down, you could go to 199 and then invest into your defenses. Right now, we have 244 into our special attack for 163, 132 into our speed for 112. We have 12 into each defense to hit 92, and then we have 108 to increase our HP up to 199. Now, we can look at a Tinted Lens set, and I was kind of playing around with this and looking into it, because right now we can go for a choice specs if we wanted to, and then that way we're getting a 50% boost into our special attack already. And the nice thing about Hisuian Braviary is it does have a signature move in the form of Esper Wing. So basically here, it's basically Psychic type Flame Charge, but it's specially damaging instead of physically. So we're a guaranteed speed boost with Esper Wing, and we have a higher than average critical hit ratio as well. That could be nice regardless of whether or not we're hitting something that resists this, because we're running Tinted Lens. Now, Esper Wing doesn't really synergize the most with Sheer Force, but you could make the case for running that on a Sheer Force set just so that you can get speed in general. And then that way you could go for damaging moves. Now, Hisuian Braviary does get Calm Mind. I did look that one up in advance, unlike Focus Blast, but you could go Calm Mind as well, and then that way you could take the choice specs out so that you could free up a slot to go for Calm Mind and Protect, but we'll talk on that in a little bit. Right there for some coverage options, what I was thinking with the choice specs is you have your Esper Wing for your main primary Psychic type stab. We could go Dazzling Gleam for some Fairy type coverage. It's a spread move, which is relatively nice. You can go for Shadow Ball for some generic coverage, hit some Ghost types, super effective. You could also just hit a lot of things that aren't called the normal type with it. You have Heat Wave to hit grass types. Now, the interesting thing too with the changes that is going to be coming in Regulation D is we might not quite see as many Terra Grasses with the amount of things that have fire coverage or the amount of things that just naturally threaten the grass typing. So we might see some changes, and if not, Heat Wave is still going to be nice to have on this thing. Now, you could change some things up. You could go for Hurricane if you wanted to go for the raw damage as well. If you still wanted to play this on Rain, you definitely could. The nice thing here is you'd have Hurricane, Tinted Lens, plus the 110 base power. That's going to dent a lot of things, and now you do have the confusion chance, so you could potentially disrupt your opponent that way too. Now, let's take a look at some Calm Mind shenanigans as well. So we'll bring up our Hisuian Braviary, we'll bring up Tinted Lens. So the nice thing with Calm Mind is you do get a natural boost to each of your special stats from it. So maybe we want to invest a little bit more into our special defense, bring it up to 100 points, and then we can go from there 132 into our speed. We'll set this to a timid nature so that we hit our 112. We have Esper Wing, which would do a good chunk of damage, and then we can have 2 more coverage options. We could go for Hurricane for big flying type stab. We could go for Heat Wave for fire coverage. We have Shadow Ball or Dazzling Gleam. One thing that I do want to put into this is Protect to help keep Braviary around. And from there, let's also finish off putting into some EVs. So what I was thinking is we can max out our special attack investment so that we just become an absolute wrecking ball. Maybe go 4 into our defense and then bring up our HP. And I don't like that 191, so we're going to bring that down to 189. We'll put a little bit more defense in there. So we'll hit 93 points. But the idea here is we go for our Calm Mind. We're naturally getting a 50% boost off our first one. 164 is a pretty good number to be getting half of its points into. 100 is not a bad one either because you're getting 50 points right there into your defense. You have the Esper Wing to increase your speed on top of that. And maybe you can even make a case for a Scope Lens or a Razor Claw to increase your crit ratio even more. And then for our last damaging move, let's maybe throw in the Dazzling Gleam, and then that way we get around dark types that are immune to our psychic type Esper Wing. That could be fun to play around with. Alright, so we basically went over a Sheer Force Life Orb set, we went over Tinted Lens choice specs, and then we even looked at Scope Lens on Tinted Lens. So that's my main thoughts on Hisuian Braviary. I'm excited to try this thing out. I hope you guys are as well. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this thing, and I will see you there.